The old station clock struck midnight, its echo lost in the sprawling fog that blanketed the platform. An otherworldly silence clung to the air, broken only by the faint whisper of a train horn somewhere in the distance. Mia stood beneath the flickering station light, her breath visible in the biting cold. She clutched an old leather suitcase tightly, her eyes scanning the empty tracks. The place seemed frozen in time, with peeling paint and rusted benches that had long ceased to welcome travelers. She glanced at her ticket again, puzzled. The ink was faint, barely readable, but one detail stood out. Train 13, final departure, midnight. There was no record of such a train in the schedules she'd checked, and yet here she was, as instructed by the cryptic letter that had appeared in her mailbox. A soft breeze stirred, carrying with it a faint metallic smell. Then she saw it. Two faint beams of light cutting through the fog, growing brighter and closer. The sound of wheels on tracks reverberated through the empty station. A train was arriving. But where would it take her, and why did her heart feel heavier with each passing second? The train rolled in, its sleek black body gleaming faintly under the dim station lights. Mia felt an unnatural chill as the doors hissed open. Inside, the carriages glowed with a faint golden light, empty except for rows of velvet seats. A conductor emerged, his uniform impeccable but oddly outdated, as though plucked from another century. His face bore a polite, unreadable expression. "Miss Mia Sterling?" he asked, his voice steady and low. She hesitated but nodded. How did he know her name? She glanced again at her ticket, the faded ink now seeming sharper. Train 13, final departure, midnight. "Welcome aboard," the conductor said, tipping his cap. "Your journey awaits." Mia stepped onto the train, the door sliding shut behind her with a soft thud. The interior was even more surreal. Everything seemed untouched by time. Brass fixtures gleamed, and the air carried a faint scent of lavender and something else. A metallic tang she couldn't place. She sank into a seat near the window, her suitcase placed carefully by her side. Through the glass, the fog outside seemed to swirl like a living thing, masking the station entirely. A soft chime sounded, and the train began to move, its motion smooth and deliberate. Mia's thoughts raced. Why had she followed the letter's instructions? She had been desperate for answers, for closure. The letter had mentioned her father, a man who had disappeared 20 years ago. "All will be revealed," it had promised. But now, as the train picked up speed and the fog thickened, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was headed somewhere far beyond her understanding. The carriage was eerily quiet, but she sensed she wasn't alone. A low hum seemed to vibrate in the air, almost like a heartbeat. As Mia turned her gaze to the aisle, her breath caught. A shadowy figure sat several rows away, its outline indistinct, but unmistakable. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice trembling. The figure didn't move. The conductor reappeared, his steps silent as he approached. "I see you've noticed our other passenger," he said with an air of calm. "Who is that?" Mia demanded, her pulse quickening. "Ah?" The conductor smiled faintly. "Some questions, Miss Sterling, are best answered in due time." The train sped into the night, the fog outside replaced by an endless void. Mia gripped her seat, the sensation of being untethered from the world growing stronger with each passing moment. This was no ordinary journey, and she wasn't sure if she would ever find her way back. "Star," she murmured. The train raced through the void, the windows offering no view of tracks or landscape, just an infinite blackness that seemed to press against the glass. Mia glanced at the shadowy figure a few rows ahead, still unmoving. Despite the conductor's cryptic assurance, unease prickled at her skin. She couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was watching her, even without turning its head. The soft hum she had noticed earlier grew louder, almost melodic, as though the train itself was alive. Shadows flickered along the walls, stretching and shrinking in impossible patterns. She clutched her suitcase tighter, her heart pounding. The conductor returned, gliding silently down the aisle. He handed Mia a small tray with a steaming cup of tea and a delicate biscuit. "A refreshment, Miss Sterling. The journey can be taxing." "I don't understand," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Where is this train going? What is this place?" The conductor gave her the same faint smile. "You'll soon understand." Before she could press further, the train shuddered violently and the lights flickered. A loud clang echoed through the carriage as though something heavy had struck the roof. Mia gasped, her eyes darting upward. "Remain seated," the conductor instructed, his tone firm but calm. He moved swiftly toward the end of the car and disappeared into the next carriage. The shadowy figure ahead finally moved, shifting slightly in its seat. Mia froze, her breath catching in her throat. Slowly the figure turned its head toward her. Its face was obscured, a blur of features that refused to come into focus. "Still limping." "Mia," a voice whispered, though no lips moved. It wasn't loud, but seemed to reverberate inside her head. The rest. She bolted upright, her pulse racing. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The figure stood, its form flickering like a disrupted signal. "You don't remember, do you?" it said, its voice layered as though multiple people spoke at once. A fissure of consciousness opened. The train jolted again, and Mia stumbled, clutching the edge of her seat. The windows flashed with scenes she couldn't comprehend. Fractured images of a snowy forest, a small child crying, and a man standing at the edge of a cliff. Each vision felt painfully familiar, yet she couldn't piece them together. The figure stepped closer, its movements disjointed, almost mechanical. "You need to remember, Mia. Everything depends on it. So does my happiness." "I don't understand," she cried, backing away. The hum of the train grew louder, almost deafening. Suddenly, the carriage doors slammed open, and the conductor returned, his face unusually pale. "Miss Sterling, it's time," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Time for what?" she asked, tears brimming in her eyes. But the conductor didn't answer. Instead, he gestured for her to follow. The shadowy figure remained still, watching as Mia hesitated. The train shuddered again, and the walls seemed to ripple like water. She clung to Michael as the train softly broke into motion again. "Make your choice," the figure whispered. With a deep breath, Mia grabbed her suitcase and followed the conductor through the door. The next carriage was nothing like the one she'd left. It was filled with old photographs, tattered journals, and fragments of memories that seemed to hang in the air. She recognized some of them: her father's smile, her childhood home, the family dog. The conductor stopped and turned to her. "This is your stop, Miss Sterling." Mia hesitated at the threshold of the new carriage, her breath catching as the train slowed, the rhythmic hum now a low, pulsating thrum. The door ahead creaked open, revealing an otherworldly landscape. Beyond the train was a sprawling field of snow, pristine and endless, shimmering under an ethereal moonlight. A single path carved its way through the frost, leading to a lone cabin with a faint glow emanating from its windows. The conductor stood beside her, his usually calm demeanor now tinged with solemnity. "This is where your journey diverges, Miss Sterling. You must step forward and face what lies ahead." She turned to him, clutching her suitcase. "What is this place? Why am I here?" He nodded toward the cabin. A gust of icy wind swept through the train, carrying whispers that seemed to echo her name. Despite the fear knotting her stomach, Mia stepped off the train and onto the frozen ground. Her boots crunched against the snow as she followed the path, her suitcase feeling heavier with each step. The cabin door was ajar, swaying slightly as if inviting her in. Taking a deep breath, Mia pushed it open. The warmth inside was immediate, a stark contrast to the biting cold. The room was small, lined with shelves filled with books and trinkets that stirred memories she couldn't quite place. At the center of the room stood a man, his back to her, his frame familiar. He turned slowly, and Mia gasped. It was her father, just as she remembered him before his disappearance 2 decades ago. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled, a mix of sorrow and relief in his expression. "You found me, Mia, after all this time." She took a hesitant step forward. "How is this possible? You vanished. Everyone said you were gone." "I've been here, waiting," he said, gesturing to a worn chair by the fireplace. "But this place, it's not what it seems. It's a crossroads, a way station between what was and what will be. My apartment contains 3 beds." Mia's grip tightened on her suitcase. "Why did you leave? Why didn't you come back?" His gaze softened. "I didn't choose to leave, Mia. I was brought here, just as you were. Something binds us to this place, our choices, our regrets. And now, you must decide whether to stay or go." The room darkened, shadows stretching along the walls. Her father's form flickered, his outline blurring like a fading photograph. "Stay with me," he urged, his voice pleading. "We can fix everything. We can be a family again." Tears streamed down Mia's face as the suitcase in her hand grew impossibly heavy. She set it down, the latch clicking open on its own. Inside were fragments of her life, photographs, letters, a child's drawing of a family under a bright sun. She picked up the drawing, the crayon lines smudged but intact. "You're not real," she whispered, her voice breaking. Her father's expression hardened. "Does it matter? Isn't this what you've wanted all these years?" The shadows coiled around her, the whispers growing louder. Mia closed her eyes, clutching the drawing. "It matters to me. I need the truth, not a mirage." Mia's heart made a metallic clatter when people pressed their noses against the pane. With that, the shadows recoiled, and her father's figure dissolved into light. The cabin faded, replaced by the train carriage she had left moments ago. The conductor stood by her side, his expression unreadable. "You made your choice," he said simply. The train was in motion again, gliding smoothly through the void. Mia sat in her seat, staring out at the endless blackness. The suitcase, now light and empty, rested by her side. She felt drained, but oddly at peace, as though a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. The conductor approached, his hands clasped behind his back. "You've done well, Miss Sterling," he said softly. "Few passengers find the strength to let go." She looked up at him, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "What happens now?" He gestured toward the window. "The path ahead is yours to choose. The train will take you where you need to be, not where you've been." The void outside began to shift, faint shapes emerging from the darkness. Rolling hills, golden fields, and a bright sky slowly took form, as if the world itself was being painted anew. The soft hum of the train faded, replaced by the gentle chirping of birds and the rustle of wind through grass. Mia exhaled, a shaky, cathartic release. She leaned back in her seat, her thoughts quiet for the first time in years. Whatever lay ahead, she felt ready to face it. The conductor tipped his hat and stepped away, leaving her alone with the serene view. She watched as the landscape unfurled, vibrant and alive, welcoming her into a world that felt full of possibility. As the train slowed to a halt at a sunlit station, Mia stepped off, leaving the shadows of the past behind, and for the first time in years, she felt truly alive.